I guess everyone that's still here is now down here in this one room. Yeah, look around. These are the last remnants of your friends that you've been talking to. Yay! I don't know about you, but this was pretty intense. I think everyone was so ready to be sharing ideas again and to, at every single lunch or breakfast, listen to new ideas. And it's all interesting, but man, my head's exploding. But it was definitely worth it, and now I know that being in real life is, virtual can't replace being here in real life, that's for sure, right? As if we needed proof, but if you needed it, here it is. So I've got good and bad news. One thing is I'm going to shortcut this closing by just calling up the roundtable. So that's going to make your program shorter, but I'm going to add another item to it, which is the drinks outside that you've seen. So that's your last chance to talk to those guys that you haven't yet spoken to. That's the drinks outside. That's after, though, the roundtable with these fellow gentlemen here, and then the closing keynote by Graham. I don't know, I have the sense that he's awake for 24 hours, right? How is he doing all these sessions? Well, he's used to it from his barn next to his house. So, without much further ado, let me call, well, it's familiar faces by now, Viet, Dave, and John up the stage for the roundtable. And I think we get to sit, right?
At the end, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'll transfer myself to the roundtable. Dave, you want to kick it off?
I will second that thing about IRL beats the crap out of virtual, no question. Within the first hour, I had a chance encounter that was really important that just doesn't happen on Zoom. So what can we say? We will be back. I will be back next year, that's for sure. So I want to start by just asking each of our panelists here what in one sentence, what's their top takeaway? And I guess it would be redundant now to say that real life beats virtual.
Sure. So I'm John Manning, for those who were here this morning, emergency physician, also CEO of May June, and I guess I'm representing the doctor, but I'll also do developer and implementer as I can. My one sentence for this is I feel like this is a home. This is the first inpatient, in-person DevDays experience that I've had. And I did feel welcome when I was joining virtually last year. And I love the community's sense of camaraderie, of working together, of feeling like, we're all in this together. And we're making strides, and we're making a lot of them together. And it's hard to find, and when you find those, you truly feel like you're welcome. And so this being my first in-person DevDays, thank you for everybody's smiles and everybody's continued desire to work together.
Great. So hopefully you've seen enough of me these last few days. So I'm Viet. So I would summarize my takeaway is reconnecting with old friends, making new friends, learning new things, and creating new opportunities to help the implementer community for you all. So I'll be short and sweet.
So my impressions are possibly pretty similar, but I can say that I was a little bit afraid over the past 2.5 years that we would succeed in actually getting the standardization and the FHIR thing going on, but we succeed in keeping the community alive. That's the second thing. And so I am really happy to see a lot of new faces here, and I think we somehow managed, even at home, to welcome new people to the community, and they've shown up here. So I am pretty happy about that, to see that, actually. That's my big takeaway. Yeah.
And in the context of this being a home, I know it feels like this, and in that kind of a setting, it's too easy to make the kind of mistake I made, which is that I didn't introduce myself, because I figure everybody knows me.
You're good.
We do. But we hope that there will be 10 times as many new people joining in, and we've got to be proactively welcoming, right? Rather than tossing around acronyms and names and everybody else feeling excluded. For me, I'm a cancer survivor. I have no developer chops. In 2007, I almost died, and one way I got better was by being heavily involved and as activated as I could be knowing that I wasn't a doctor. And a year and a half later, I discovered there was garbage in my chart. And I wrote a blog post about it that landed on the front page of the Boston Globe, and people started asking me to come to DC to talk about this stuff. I'm like, what? And my slogan by the end of the year was, give me my damn data, because you guys can't be trusted with it. So for this to be happening now, for patients to be getting access, this is just a miraculous fulfillment, and I could say a lot more, but what should we do next? Other most favorite observations, or should we jump to FHIR a year from now?
Well, I've got a few more observations. But
No.
Yeah, not just about the community, but my other big takeaways, I think, but that's more like, if we can talk content a little bit, right, is that it seemed that every table I was on, we talked about versioning and versioning pains. So it seems that FHIR is now growing to somewhere where, you know, we've managed with some, well, how can I say most, but some of the technical difficulties, and now we're using it in real life, and then we'll see all the, you know, all the problems that exist because of communication between people, you know, coordinating projects, budgets, and it's all has to do with we're starting to depend on each other, and that's why we're going to see all these versioning dependencies, project dependencies, versioning problems, and that was a repeating theme, I think, through these days, for me at least.
Yeah. I would add on to that, as versioning is one of a number of challenges that we're facing that are just recognitions of maturation.
Yeah.
And,
Sure.
you know, I've stopped saying that FHIR as an emerging technology. Folks, we've been around for 11 years
11
now.
years, yep.
But even an 11-year-old kid, I have a 10-and-a-half-year-old kid, they're still maturing. He can run and walk and do most things adults do, but just can't do it very well. So I think we're learning that we have to do that maturation of our standards and actually the implementation of them in order to support the community. So I feel like it's a good challenge, and it's a recognition that people are adopting it, because if people weren't adopting it, nobody would care.
That's right.
And as somebody who is, I will say, more recently adopted as compared to the people that are here, of course, and been working and developing with that, I feel like we're now at a point where the software development kits, the SDKs that we have access to, are helping lower that barrier of entry into FHIR. Firefly, TypeScript, Kotlin, et cetera. If you're an app developer, you now have multiple options ahead of you to actually use this standard in a manner that is object-oriented and perhaps a little bit more familiar to you. And I'm loving to see how this continues to go forward as we're doing more with versioning, because, you know, that barrier will be lower and lower, and I imagine adoption will continue to grow. There's so much wonderful stuff in FHIR, and you can't just jump in and learn the whole standard, but you can work with the parts that you need in the relevant areas that you need, following the appropriate implementation guides and examples.
You know, I'm starting to, and it's funny, again, comparing this space, and I think that's a wonderful meeting space out there. I've never seen at any conference a better meeting space for bumping into people and having useful conversations. Starting to see people talk about some sort of a new era that's going to make today's and recent years' reality almost unrecognizable, in the same way that if you could go back today and look at the web 20 years ago, what we could and could not do with it is just, you know, it's funny, my granddaughter, whose pictures many of you have seen in the last couple of days, I was trying to explain to her that when I was growing up, there were no emojis. And she said, why?
Because we talked to you.
And she's 8. But seriously, what became, initially, I remember when air travel was new online, and the inventory on the airplanes was not connected to the sales systems. You know, so they could sell you a seat that it turns out didn't actually exist. And over time, as people got used to it and everything got integrated and people started doing things differently, now it's vastly different. And I can barely imagine what it will be like right? When the family and the doctor who need to get the job done are no longer hampered by lack of information.
So to give direct clinical examples that I've seen in my very short career, I had a patient years ago who walked across the street and was in kidney failure. I have no idea what their baseline was, even though the two health systems were literally across the street. For another patient, I'll say more recently, tried to do medication reconciliation, but they had 8 different versions of their own medications that were available. It's hard to figure out which one is which. And then just a few weeks ago, I had a patient who was worried about having a blood clot in her leg. And we got an ultrasound, and by the time I came back to visit her, she already had the answer on her phone and was feeling better because she knew immediately she didn't have a clot. And so it was a very short discussion about the other things we did, and she was able to go home with ease of mind. This is the last decade. This isn't a long time. I imagine it's going to keep going down this path, and for better.
So many of you in this room I recognize have been working in healthcare for a long time. But having met a number of you here, you have been in other industries for a long time. Bring that expertise, bring what you've learned from those other industries, and help us in healthcare to use FHIR and to modernize. And for those of you who you're on your first or second job and maybe they've always been in healthcare, hold on to that enthusiasm to make the change and work with us, some of these old folks like us, and in terms of hear us when we say that it's probably harder than you think it is, but that's okay. We're still work to be done and improvements to be made, and I think we have a lot to learn from other industries in order to make them. We don't have to make the same mistakes. We'll have a hard enough with our own challenges that we should learn from the other industries, like we've learned about, from Alyssa and the security issues.
Yeah, right. Well, and I would say that as a developer, if you come in from a different industry, which I did, is that the first thing I noticed about this industry is that everything is so slow, right? Yeah. Why can't you just, you must have friends and family saying, like, why is it so hard to exchange patient data? And that's my experience as well. Just before we went in here, I talked about an app that I developed for brain tumor patients, right? Where they could see their medications that I had to take for that day. And it was a nice app, the patient, especially if you have a brain tumor, it's not that obvious what you have to take when, your antiemetics, your cytostatics, the whole shebang. And it was all there, written out for them in their app, and they could just, cross it off and say, how they felt, were they nauseous, and so on. So it sounded like a good idea at the time. But I must admit, no one's using it, right? It was such a good app, and I don't be disheartened by these kind of things, right? The day will come, but it takes time still.
Isn't that what Apple just introduced?
Yeah, so that's what I heard. Yeah, so I'm happy with that, right? My app doesn't need to be a success, but I'm happy we're slowly getting there.
And the astounding thing for me, when I was fresh out of cancer in 2007. My first discharge, I was nearly dead, stage 4 kidney cancer. I had this complicated medication schedule, not unlike that. By the way, if anybody knows on Twitter, there's an extraordinary patient data activist named Liz Salmi. The Liz Army is her Twitter handle. And she's just had a recurrence of her brain cancer. And she responded to the announcement of this thing for the exact same reason. It's like, OMG, this arrives right now just as I need it. But in my case, a nurse practitioner had used a pencil and a ruler to draw a schedule grid for me for the medications I was going to have to take at home. And I was just a random guy who knew about mashups, and I said, why didn't the computer do this? She said, computers can't do this kind of thing. So to see this, again, really, to see this kind of thing coming all the way around. I asked Ricky, did you guys know that story? He said no. But anyway, mashups. I want to add one other thing. The Patient Empowerment Work Group, which was approved by the HL7 board a couple of years ago and has been working, it thrills me that we are at a stage of maturation where our first IG has been balloted and is making its way into reality. And incredibly, remember that thing about give me my damn data because you guys can't be trusted. The first project that got approved for us to do, and this IG, is how to implement patient requests for corrections in FHIR. And if in our session about this IG the other day, I asked how many people in the room had actually checked their own charts, because it turns out 80% of people's records have errors in them that can be problematic someday. So eat your own dog food, as they say. If you haven't checked your own chart for mistakes and tried to get them corrected, please do. Your turn.
Well, I mean, I'll just give the physician's perspective. Any way that we can make that easier on behalf of our patients, of course, we're happy to do that. And I've, so I'm informatics trained. Amy is clinical informatics fellows, had a podcast where they would talk about, they called it Go Live. And in one of their episodes, they interviewed the person who created, or the driver behind Open Notes. And he described his typical clinical scenario, which I'm not sure if that's common across the US, but I love that idea. And he essentially would co-write the patient's chart with them at the bedside while they're talking in an outpatient clinic. And so that they could see that you don't even have that need for correction if you're working together on this, which is wonderful. The fact that patients can read their notes right after, while we're doing them, I think it's the right way forward. And it'll be interesting to see how this continues to progress on behalf of our patients and for the better.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to engaging the patients, it's like with the rest of interoperability. Let's make the data available and then help them to be more engaged and knowledgeable about their own care. So it's not, we just can't throw them a lot of data just like we're throwing doctors more data. We have to make it useful to them. I think the pill app and the timing is a great example, but trying to help make it more useful to them. And let's not forget, we're not only helping the patients, but we're helping the caregivers, because we have a lot of individuals in my own family helping take care of others, whether they be the individual's parents or the individual's children. So let's keep that in mind as well.
In our work group, it's doctrine that patient means everybody on the patient side of the equation, exactly.
I'll also add, if that's okay, I frequently, when you can tell when patients and caregivers are paying attention, I thank them for being health literate and for taking ownership of their health care.
Mm.
I don't have much to add to that, but I know we got still 2 minutes, and I think it's okay. It would be nice if each of us would maybe still mention what is going up for the next year of FHIR, right? Next year when we're all in Amsterdam, what do you think will have changed? I just said everything moves slowly, yeah. So even considering that, what will be the next thing over the next year?
So I'll try to be brief. I think domestic to the US, because I keep reminded that there's the API rules for the end of the year, so I'm hoping that by next year we'll have more. Those endpoints are there, and where the network effect really takes effect, and so that all you innovators now have endpoints to work with. Outside the US, and I look forward to Amsterdam, is hearing about where things are happening in the other parts of the world when it comes to FHIR, and where the opportunities for us to grow informatics expertise, interoperability expertise, and the use of HL7 standards and interoperability through the rest of the world. And certainly my colleague Diego here is helping spearhead that to grow our international or global community.
I think, and I mentioned this briefly with the SDKs, I think we're going to have more adoption on a rapid pace with others that are able to use an object-oriented approach to FHIR, so that now we'll have more apps in patients' hands. Frankly, what I want to see in 1 year from now is a patient show me a better medication reconciliation than I can see in my EMR. I want to see a patient show me their data optimized in a way that I could never do at that speed.
We have to show you Mike Morris's speech from DC a couple of years ago. I'll just end by switching back to the other industries thing. I used to work in the typesetting industry, and I have lived long enough that I have had people say to me, what is typesetting? And when desktop publishing came along and typesetting machines were no longer necessary, we professionals were horrified because we knew that you wouldn't know how to use fonts right. And, well, I mean, you don't even know what kerning is, for heaven's sake, much less why you're not supposed to put letter spacing between italics, right? And everybody just sort of belched and farted and went off and did whatever they wanted, like whatever dude, and the rest of us went out of business and found another industry. It is clear that, I've seen this movie before. I know how it's going to go. The people who have the need are going to go and do what they find valuable, and we'll be supporting them.
Well, finally, well, you're already talking about Amsterdam next year. It's interesting to see. I think over the coming year, what we'll see outside of the U.S. I think the U.S. is a little bit ahead, actually, of the rest of the world now. So I think we'll see that over the next year, many more countries will start implementing at scale their full national solutions, installing fire infrastructure. And so maybe the word for me for next year is, you know, fire at national scale, really at scale. I mean, me as a software engineer, I must say that most of my daytime currently is only about performance, 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 right? The software that I wrote 10 years ago for fire, it needs to perform. We had a wonderful talk here from Nikolai about how to get your file server up to scale, and I think that will fill my hours for the next year, and I think that will be a big theme over the next year from, you know, if I look at the software implementer community, yeah.
I guess quick closing remark, the one big speed bump we've run into is that it turns out that trying to get an ordinary patient involved in the HL7 process, for instance, as a co-chair is just really difficult. It's burdensome, and Graham is going to say some more about this. Well, I've had to resign myself as co-chair of the group. Yeah. So, okay.
I guess Graham should be. That's a good bridge to the next section. Actually, I think Graham should be here now.
See what I did there?
Yeah. But is he here?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Yeah.
Good day, Graham.
Hey. Lovely to see you all.
Yeah. We can only look at you, and then you see our backs. So I'll go look at you like this.
I'm going to step down.
I can only look at you too. All right, can you see me?
Yeah. Yes. You're right in front of us now.
Okay, great. So, well, it's the end of another Dev Days, and I'm not there. Oh, it's killing me. This is my home. So obviously the first thing I should talk about is that, the whole hybrid question, in-person question. I've seen a few comments from my friends about how great it is to be there. But believe me, I am not there, and I know how great it is to be there. I've really missed that. Now, I just heard some really thing about me and 24 hours and catching everything. So the reason I'm not there, for those few who haven't heard from me about this, is I got COVID 13 days ago. In like 2.5 years, I'd avoided it, and then I got it on exactly the day that when I couldn't make Dev Days. It was fun. Not, but it never got serious. I'm just left with a cough and just tiredness. It's just fine. I can't complain about that. And then Kath got it, and she went through a crisis a few days ago, but she's getting better. So it's good. But you'll be amused to know I have a 16-year-old daughter who is ultimately frustrated. She can't get it. She went to the football 2 weeks ago. She shared a drink bottle all night with a friend who got a diagnosis, tested the next morning. Not my daughter, who gets tested every 3 days, period. Because she's an Australian school kid. What does she have to do? Why does my daughter want to get COVID? First of all, everybody else has, that she knows. And she's like, what's wrong with you? You haven't got COVID. And actually, because in 3 weeks' time, 2 weeks' time, she's going to Greece to meet me in Greece and to do the Greek islands. And she's like super excited to be traveling for the first time. It's like she hasn't been out of Australia once before the government said she couldn't. And then she's been crying to get out of Australia ever since. And she's going to Greece and she's super excited. And so as of yesterday, she says to me seriously, Dad, I don't want to get it anymore. She just wanted to get it done so it couldn't impact on the holiday. So no doubt with our luck, she'll get it the day before we leave. They leave. Who knows? All right. So the hybrid experience. Obviously, it's speaking as a remote participant. There's been some organisational speed bumps that were pretty obvious, but you guys got on top of it pretty quick. So well done. Usually, if I'm there, I'm like, we need to get the whole team up and congratulate them. I don't know whether that'll happen, but really, the team that put this together and dealt with all the weird challenges around Zoom accounts and just getting everything together, really well done. Please take time to thank them for making this work. Big challenge. And some of that challenge is just dealing with new challenges coming your way all the time. We're starting to travelling within Australia now, my family. So my older daughter has moved to Brisbane. We're missing her badly. So we've done, in the last 4 weeks, as a family, 10 flights between us all. One of them was on time. The worst was 5 hours late. Luggage disappears, planes disappear, people disappear. Qantas, which used to be a pretty well-run ship, they're a mess, totally a mess. And yet that's what I'm seeing everywhere. It's just really hard to organise stuff. And I'm sure that the organisers were like really thrilled when I told them, I'm not coming. And like, I would have tried to come anyway, but there was no way I was up to travel, and not that I was allowed. So, on the one hand, well done to the organisers, thank you. Oh, yeah, I got distracted. 24-hour wake, are you kidding me? I'm not doing that right now. I'm too tired for that. But on the other hand, all of us are struggling to deal with organisational chaos. We had our first Health IT conference in Australia a few months ago, since COVID. It was midsummer, so we're all happy and we're all back. Actually, no, about 80% of us are back. I heard from people who were like, oh no, we're not going back yet. Plenty of people who were there got COVID, so maybe that wasn't such a bad idea. But I was struck forcefully by two things. One was that everything changed operationally for healthcare providers. Most of the presentations were about, this is what we did to our systems to change the way we operated, to build teams or something equivalent into our operating processes, to rethink the ways that we've done things for centuries, to totally do team-based provision of healthcare differently. At the same time, I was forcefully struck by how nothing's changed. Nothing at all is different. We ticked the box on dealing with our operational changes, and we're patting ourselves on the back for how well we're doing healthcare IT. and yet nobody's, no changes have been made to the things that really matter to me. I listened to Saba's presentation about, one thing she said in there was about clinical errors and communication errors, and what is loosely called the fog of war. Maybe it should be called the fog of medicine. It's like that's got worse, not better. Talking to actual participants in the healthcare system. And so chaos is just more evident in our lives now. So I really enjoyed the clinical keynotes, and I had several comments about that. So well done, the team, John, Viet, for pulling that together. You know, it was interesting because Rian asked me 5 years ago, when DevDays wasn't quite so big, a bunch of us went to a restaurant after DevDays, and apparently I said something about how EHRs would be commoditized within a 5-year time frame. How's that going? Well, the presentation this morning is a theme that's kind of emerged since I said that, around systems of engagement and systems of record. And that was really evident, what Suba was talking about. That was a system of engagement. Kind of feel as though that's a transient stage towards a system that works. But before we can get to a system that works, we need to re-envisage what healthcare is and how it's provided. And the one thing that sort of stood out to me, and has really emerged, I should say this right, it has emerged to the point that it stands out for me, is that healthcare is provided by people, for people, and experienced by those people and their relationships. But record keeping is provided by institutions. And there's a core conflict at the heart of that, that records are kept by the institutions, for the institutions, in the way institutions value. And sometimes I love Dave. Dave, you're great. Thank you for being involved. But it's easy to fall into patients versus providers. And it's not unjustified. But I think we should stand back and look at the big picture and say it's not patients versus providers, it's people versus institutions in the business that we're involved with. I love John Manning's, your call before, for, a patient behaving that way. But why can't you have an app that behaves that way? Let's empower people, whether they're providers or they're primary carers or they're, patients or primary carers or providers or, the provider's assistants. What I want to do and what our mission is, it seems to me, is empowering individuals. It's really fascinating. It's hiding in my shed here, Eva referred to before. I can't really show you. No, there's on the floor here behind me. It doesn't really work, but I'm sleeping on the floor here. Because I just awake asleep. Oh, it's killing me. But hiding in my hole here and looking at the experience of society versus big media. We just had an election here in Australia. The entire media apparatus was on one side. Not either side, one side. was sickening. They're not on our side. And it's kind of the same with patients and providers versus institutions. Unfortunately, institutions are just us. So it's, that's our experience. And I think that we're a really important part of the overall picture, in as much as we create public knowledge, public property that everybody owns, we enable corporations and institutions to do what they do in a way that serves individuals. So it's not like the war is we must destroy institutions. It's just that we must turn the institutions to serve us. But given the opportunity, institutions serve institutions. And it's open specifications, open community, open knowledge. That is the only way we can possibly change that around. And so our mission to be open, to describe how information is exchanged, to gather that in public, to do patent busting, and say to the institutions and the vendors that we work for, if you want to get a profit, you need to provide value. You can't just do lock-in. I love vendors. They pay me. They pay us. It's pretty good. I like being paid. I'm sure all of you do too. But what I like being paid for is doing good work that benefits people, not churn that locks people in. And so that brings me back to Rian's question. How much progress have we made? Some. Change happening, and it continues to happen. We couldn't have had some of those discussions that we had last few days, a few years ago, and yet change isn't happening fast enough. Because all of us, as well as being paid by health providers and IT providers of various kinds, we're also patients, as are our families, subject to the same system that we know and love. So it's not like our urgency of change is dropping off, and change is not happening quick enough to make me happy. It's happening though, that makes me happy. Well, so it's good and bad. We have a lot to do. So I'll finish up. Thank you all for attending in person, online. Everything counts. Being part of the community. When I know, I live and breathe this community, so I'm all in. But I think that we really do make a difference. I've traditionally ended this keynote by commenting on the state of civilization as a whole and how worried I am about civil discourse. Well, I think in the since the last DevDays, the erosion of civil discourse has become ever more obvious, ever more serious, ever more killing. It's really distressing. And so it's ever more important for all of us to believe in and to act like we believe in civil discourse within the healthcare community by contributing to open communities, and in our own lives by committing to civil behaviour, civil discourse, and civil communications and relationships. All of you being here, it means that you're doing that. Thank you very much. It's really important for us all. So thanks for being there, or being not there, but still listening, being part of it. I'm really looking forward to being there in person myself next time. Who knows how things, will we keep going hybrid? That's a question for organisers who have to deal with feedback and profit and costs and so forth. But I'm looking forward to engaging with you more in person or virtually. And thank you very much.
Shall I do it? Well, it feels a little bit weird for me to do it, but I think...
We'll do it together.
Yeah, we'll do it together. Can we invite our yellow shirt friends over to here?
Yeah.
To wave all of you goodbye.
Oh, here comes Marianne.
Hi, I'm Marianne.
So, oh, come on. So on behalf of the HL7 team and the Firely team, we want to thank you all for being with us. It was great to see all your faces. Again, reconnect with those of you that we've known and to make some new friends and colleagues. Let's keep track of all those follow-up emails and meetings that we have so that we can grow our community. And we look forward to seeing you, hopefully, in Amsterdam next year. If not in person, then online. And of course, throughout the year with all our activities. And let's give a warm thank you to the team that helped bring us all together. Thank you very much. Let's give it a big wave. Let's give it a big wave. Thanks, folks. Take care and be safe on your way home. Stay healthy.
Drinks.
Drinks. Yes.